terms. When it comes to the question of what is anime...
What is anime?
What is anime? Is Boondocks anime? Is Avatar anime?
Over here in Japan, animations are anime. So at the end of the day...
What is anime? So we're talking about the same...
What is anime?
Those are cartoons. Those aren't anime.
It's really...
What is anime? I know a lot of you are a bit confused by that question. You might even be a little upset because, of course, anime is just Japanese animation, right? It's just Japanese cartoons. The question doesn't even deserve to be asked. How dare you even make a video about this? Well, before you click away, hear me out. Hey guys, I'm Josh. Yokoso minasan, ore wa Josh desu. And I'm going to be making a lot of anime content. For those who don't know me, I'm a video finishing artist, voiceover artist, charisma coach, and professional anime enjoyer. This will be my first big video essay, but definitely not my last. And boy, are we starting with a very touchy subject. According to, well, everyone, apparently, anime is most commonly defined as Japanese animation. But what exactly does that mean? What is Japanese animation? This conventional wisdom suggests that for a work to be considered anime, it must originate from Japan. But this raises the question, what exactly does it mean for something to be made in Japan? Do all the animators have to be in Japan? Does the entire production have to be in Japan? Does it have to be based on a Japanese manga? How much exactly of the production must be in Japan for it to be considered Japanese? And these questions are not just academic, they have real implications for creators and fans alike. It affects how we discuss it, how we define our groups, our cliques, our fandoms. If this channel is going to mainly focus on anime, I want to start with solid foundations. Having a clear definition allows us to appreciate anime's nuances, from thematic exploration to artistic innovation. Fans drive anime's popularity and cultural recognition, organizing conventions, making fan art, and engaging in critical discussions. Or, as Mother's Basement points out, we need to know what counts when we talk about anime, with friends or on forums. Should works like Avatar be included on my anime list? Should Solo Leveling or Castlevania? As these communities grow, so does its audience, bringing new perspectives, new artists, and new cultural influences. And it not only bolsters anime's standing in the global media landscape, but it also foments its ongoing evolution. In short, anime has to mean something. The storytelling, visual language, tropes, and more are what sets anime apart from Western animation. Saying anime is from Japan doesn't communicate anything other than the location of the production company. To me, that makes the word all but useless. Language evolves, the way we use words changes over time as culture itself evolves. Words and meaning existed before dictionaries, and as definitions change, so too must the dictionary definition. What I'm trying to accomplish here is, well, two things. Partially, I'm trying to define the way the word is already used. What is the natural cultural meaning? What do people actually mean when they say anime? Not how do they define it when asked, but rather what do they actually mean when they use it in conversation? Because I don't actually think the meaning has changed. That brings me to my second goal, which is maybe a bit more ambitious. If the meaning hasn't changed, I need to demonstrate what anime has been all along. And in this age of communication, I feel like we have an unprecedented opportunity. I can advocate for a definition on a platform that can make my case to the world, an opportunity to advocate for the definition that imbues the term anime with all the cultural context and meaning so many already imply when they say it. A definition that communicates all the media, past, present, and future, that we mean when we say we want to talk about anime. You can visualize something in your mind when you're asked what anime is. You know anime when you see it. If something is indistinguishable from anime, are we as fans supposed to be responsible for knowing where each individual production comes from just to talk about it? Defining anime solely by its country of origin renders the term nearly meaningless, as it provides no insight into the distinct artistic styles, storytelling techniques, and cultural contexts that are intrinsic to and inseparable from anime. Yes, it originated from Japan, but can it only come from Japan? A more useful definition would focus on the nuance and characteristics that set anime apart. Even if, right here, right now, we decide it still has to come from Japan, we can still benefit from a more precise, accurate, and meaningful, full definition. So, what is it if not Japanese animation? First, let's debunk a few myths. One argument I hear a lot is that anime is just short for animation, and therefore all and only Japanese animations are anime. But funnily enough, people use that logic in reverse too. Since anime in Japan refers to all animation, some argue that we can call anything anime. So you can probably already see where the major flaw in that logic is. First, if we're sticking strictly to the Japanese definition, anime does indeed refer to all animations, so Family Guy, South Park, Archer, and King of the Hill would all be considered anime. So are all cartoons anime? Obviously, like I just said, some people use this to make that exact same argument. Although, if we take a more charitable interpretation, we might say something like, okay, if anime is just the Japanese word for animation, then we should use Zeichenfilm when talking about German cartoons, or Karikatur for Saudi Arabian cartoons. But that doesn't quite capture how the word is actually used, does it? Take the word queso in Spanish. It means cheese. All cheese, any cheese, cheddar, Parmesan, mozzarella, cheese.
Cheese.
But in American English, queso refers specifically to a melted cheese dip. This is a form of semantic shift. The word queso in English is related to its Spanish origins, but the meaning has shifted to its new cultural environment. Similarly, the Japanese borrowed the word animation, advertising cartoons or manga eiga, comic movies, as animation. And over time, it turned into anime. It was borrowed again by English speakers as they needed a convenient word to define a specific type of media that was coming from Japan. This shows that just like with queso, the meaning of anime evolved when it was adopted by a different culture. While related to its linguistic origins, anime now carries a distinct meaning in the West. It always has. Another common belief is that anime is only produced in Japan, but what does that really mean? And don't get me, obviously you know what I mean. I don't. Explain it to me. The anime industry has relied on outsourcing for decades. Studios in South Korea, China, the Philippines, India, and, depending on how you count freelancers, even Canada or Italy. They handle tasks like in-between or tween animation, coloring, background art, and sometimes entire episodes. Outsourcing isn't new either. It's been an integral part of the production process since the very first anime, Astro Boy. Fast forward to present day, as much as 70% of Toei's animation, yes, that Toei, by the way, is outsourced to the Philippines alone. So, how much of a production must be in Japan to even consider it Japanese? We run into a paradox of the heap issue. If you have a heap of sand and remove one grain of sand, is it still a heap? Of course it is. So, if a single episode has tweens animated overseas, it's still made in Japan. That just makes sense. So, we take another grain of sand, one by one. Eventually, we no longer have a heap. The question is, when precisely is it not a heap? What is the last grain of the heap before it becomes a few grains of sand? According to the Anime Encyclopedia by Clements and McCartney, by our definition, a work is Japanese if the majority of the main creatives, director, scriptwriter, character designer, and key animators are Japanese. And, of course, many shows have multiples of each of these roles, and we assume that the list is incomplete for brevity's sake, and not that they consider these the single most important creative roles and therefore the only ones that matter, right? So, we all know a lot of key animation is done in Korea and the Philippines, not to mention other outsourcing locations. Is it still animated in Japan if the key animators, not just the tweens, are outside Japan? What about writers, editors? Once it's only a director and the character designers, we've met the halfway point. Is it still made in Japan? So let's reverse it. Take a couple grains of sand. Add a grain. Is it a heap now? An American production adds a Japanese director, then Japanese writers. Then, for good measure, the character design is done in Japan. When is it anime? Afro Samurai was a collaboration between Samuel L. Jackson, Riza, Okazaki, the original mangaka, and Gonzo. The manga and anime are a fusion of Japanese Bushido romanticism and Black American hip-hop music and culture. They had American writers, editors, and producers, but it's considered anime because it's based on a manga, and a plurality of animators were in Japan. As to what percentage, I couldn't find any definitive information, but apparently 30% still counts as in Japan, so I guess, right? So if a collaboration of that magnitude is still a heap, the lines are already blurred. Like the ship of Theseus, each time the ship is repaired, a single plank is replaced. We all know the drill. Eventually, there is not a single original plank. Is there ever a point where it isn't the ship of Theseus? If all creative elements that make it into the final project are the same, but it's not made in Japan, is it still anime? The Japanese do have a response to this kind of logic. I'll just leave this here and let you decide for yourself. The truth is that anime is more than just where it's animated. It's about the unique fusion of creative direction and storytelling that does come from its roots in Japanese culture, but yes, even when it's supported by a global workforce. As AnimeTudes puts it, if we define anime as purely Japanese, we quickly encounter the risk of creating some sort of essence of Japaneseness, which would irradiate the media. On the flip side, if we just ignore its cultural roots and just analyze it through a Western lens, we reduce it to generic storytelling principles, missing what makes it unique in the first place. So in the end, how does defining anime by where it was made affect how we discuss it, find it, experience it, or judge it? Take these 4 shows. According to my anime list criteria, which of these would be considered anime? Got your answer? No, Jeremy, it's not a secret 5th answer. They're not all anime, and it's not none of them either. Either because you knew this was a bit of a trick question, or because you've seen it before. Some of you know it was 4, Basatsu Olympia Kaiklos. It doesn't even look like anime, does it? But it's the only Japanese production here, unless you count Oban Star Racers, which was just as much a collaboration this time with France as Afro Samurai. But people don't consider it anime despite more of the animation occurring in Japan than many modern anime. Okay, rewind the tape. I said Bisatsu Olympia Kaiklos is anime even though it doesn't look like anime. What exactly does anime look like? Plenty of casual fans seem to think that anime is just the style of the animation. They'll look at those 4 shows and call the one or ones that look the most anime and guess, well, that one clearly. Even some genuine otaku might think, understandably, it's the overall style, arguing that anime-inspired shows just don't get it 100%, so that's why non-Japanese shows don't count. But this one is pretty easy to address. Astro Boy, Attack on Titan, Princess Knight, Jujutsu Kaisen, Gegege no Kitaro, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Astro Boy. And Astro Boy isn't just considered anime, it's the anime, the first anime. And not just Western fans, Japanese historians call this the first anime. So I will ask again, if Japanese animation is not a sufficient definition, what is? According to Wikipedia, blasphemous I know, an artistic movement refers to a tendency or style in art with a specific common philosophy or goal pursued by a group of artists during a specific period of time. Typically emerging as a reaction to a preceding norm, cultural zeitgeist, or an older style, these movements often seek to express new ideas, experiment with technique, and challenge the status quo. Artistic movements can encompass various forms of creative expression, including painting, sculpture, literature, and performing arts, each defined by unique characteristics and driven by shared ideologies among the artists. These movements not only influence the aesthetic and technical aspects of art, but also reflect broader cultural and social shifts, offering insight into the historical context from which they arise. In the realm of film specifically, artistic movements often arise when filmmakers collectively push the boundaries of conventional filmmaking in order to explore new narrative techniques, visual styles, or thematic concerns. For example, the French New Wave, Nouvelle Vague, the French New Wave, challenged traditional cinematic forms and narratives in the late 1950s and 60s with its radical approach to storytelling and visual composition. Directors like Jean-Luc Godard and François Truffaut broke away from the narrative continuity in favor of naturalistic dialogue, embraced unconventional editing techniques like jump cuts, and utilized location shooting and handheld camera work to infuse a sense of realism into their films. For technical and practical purposes, most films at the time were edited on a multi-angle setups and entirely on sound stages before this convention was challenged by French New Wave artists. These movements in film not only innovate artistically, but also often critique or comment on social issues, influencing both the art form of cinema and its cultural perception. French New Wave, German Expressionism, many film movements defined an era and left behind techniques that still influence modern filmmaking. But they were bound to a specific time in history. So, is anime an artistic movement? If we follow the strictest definition, anime would have to be restricted to a single era. Can you make a French New Wave film today? While artistic movements tend to be tied to a specific period, isn't that always the case? I actually had to go back and forth on this. It is a relatively nuanced question to ask. So even though the answer might seem obvious to you, it's important that we go through the steps. Because my answer is no, obviously. But the question is, why not? I could check every stylistic box, but there's one major difference. Well, two. I am neither French, nor making a film in the cultural, political, and social landscape of the 1950s. French New Wave wasn't just about the style, it was a reaction to Hollywood's classical filmmaking. Aha, you might say, you just admitted it has to be made by someone French, so if anime is an artistic movement, it must be Japanese. Not so fast, it's not about geography, it's about culture. French New Wave isn't defined by where it was made, but by the specific cultural movement it was responding to. But all of that is some pretty heavy stuff, and while anime, even the earliest, dealt with real cultural and political issues, we certainly can't restrict anime to only that type of media. So, was there another kind of film movement? Enter the movie brats movement. In the 1940s and 50s, Hollywood was dominated by stage-trained directors, actors, and writers. Theatrical performances shaped their style. Big, expressive acting wasn't just an artistic choice, but a necessity due to how audio was recorded and limitations of grayscale film. It was also due to the only places to learn the craft being theater school and on-stage experience. But as film grew in popularity, a new generation of filmmakers emerged. These directors, Spielberg, Scorsese, Coppola, Lucas, were the first to go to school for film. Unlike their predecessors, they didn't learn storytelling on the stage, they studied movies. They were exposed to avant-garde and international cinema without the industry's old biases. And that new perspective changed Hollywood forever. But if all it takes to be part of the movie brats is to be taught in film school, why is it only considered the 60s and 70s? Why is The Godfather and American Graffiti movie brat, but not The Matrix? To put it simply, it can only be your first time once. The movie brat generation changed Hollywood forever, and once it did, you could never make a movie brat movie again. They were learning from filmmakers trained in theater, then added from filmmakers with no training at all. But once the movement got into full swing, new students and filmmakers were learning from the movie brats. And once again, by its very nature, a film movement is beholden to the time and culture surrounding it. But is the same true for, let's say, Impressionist painting? Impressionism was a painting movement in the 1870s and 1880s. They challenged strict academic standards, favoring loose brushwork and an emphasis on light and movement. Today, We still see Impressionist styles, but no one is calling the modern paintings part of the Impressionist movement. During the movement, the art was heavily criticized. It was seen as an affront to the artists of the time. You can use all the same techniques popularized or born in that movement, but you will never create an art piece that contains the same cultural weight, as culture has changed. Some might even argue that Dadaism is the closest modern movement to Impressionism, given how Impressionists were treated by the larger painting community. I mean, I wouldn't, but someone might. So, if cultures have changed since the beginning of anime, will anime one day not exist? Will the movement end? Has it already ended? Is there no more anime? Or did it never exist at all? While anime certainly originates in 1960s Japan, restricting it to only and all animations in Japan is narrow and less accurate as time goes on, as we've already discussed. And as we've already discussed, it's clearly not a style or medium, with anime like Panty and Stocking, Astro Boy, and Fairy Tail all being anime with wildly different styles. Defining anime as an artistic movement acknowledges that it has evolved beyond simple geographic or stylistic confines. It's a dynamic cultural and artistic expression, one that continuously pushes creative boundaries. Like the French New Wave, anime has experimented with unique narrative structures and distinct visual techniques. It's more than just Japanese animation. Anime has changed animation. It innovated, influenced, and it resonated with artists worldwide. And while it still has deep ties to its Japanese origins, its influence is undeniably global. French New Wave's cultural context might be French, but animes might very well be global culture. So let's take a very brief look at what influenced anime, what it's responding to, and how it holds up as an artistic movement. Anime's cultural roots run deep, tracing back to the early 20th century Japan, when animation was referred to by various names: senga, or line art, manga eiga, or cartoon films, and doga, moving pictures. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that the term anime became widely adopted. Before what is widely considered the first anime, Japan had live-action films with cell animation, propaganda films, and experimental animated shorts, many of which pioneered techniques that would define the anime industry. And since films like Momotaro Umi no Shinpei qualifies as made in Japan, then the title of first anime must be up for debate, mustn't it? Historian Sugata Nobuyuki highlights the evolution of anime, identifying key expansions in its definition that coincide with influential works such as Astro Boy in 1963, which marked a significant shift in the medium of animation in Japan, integrating it more deeply with other media and marketing elements. So why is Astro Boy considered the first anime instead of films like Momotaro? Because it represents the moment when animation in Japan took on a distinctive identity, both stylistically and culturally, rather than simply being cartoons made in Japan. More importantly, Astro Boy made it overseas. It was the first animation from Japan that became a truly global phenomenon. Astro Boy was deeply inspired by Japan's post-war fascination with technology. The rapid westernization of Japan during Reconstruction also introduced a lot of Western ideas and aesthetics, shaping not only anime, but broader Japanese pop culture. But keeping on Astro Boy for now. One of these Western influences was Disney. The story goes that when Tezuka went to see Disney cartoons at his local theater, he would sneak in a pencil and paper and draw the characters on screen. And you can see that Disney influence in his designs. Large, expressive eyes, rounded shapes, and exaggerated movements. In fact, when Astro Boy aired in the US, its animation style was so similar to American cartoons that many viewers assumed it was an American production. Not that the heavy localization didn't help with that, of course. Some sources also attribute the Japanese marketing for Astro Boy as the inception for the usage of the shortened anime instead of animation. The distinction between Japanese animation and anime is particularly important. Sugata argues that anime refers to a specific subset of Japanese animations that emerged post-1960s, characterized by its stylistic innovations and cultural significance, while Japanese animation includes all animated works from Japan, meaning claymations, 3D animations, paper cut animation, and anything else that doesn't, look like anime. Again, whatever that means. So, what does anime look like? If it's an artistic movement, we should be able to point out key elements that distinguish anime from Western animation. That can get really complicated really fast. Let's go back to our trusty French New Wave. To be considered a French New Wave film, you needed existential themes, anti-conventional production, to be French, de-emphasize plot, improvised dialogue, jump cuts, indifference towards continuity, location shooting, handheld camera shots, long takes, and minimalist lighting. But here's the catch, it doesn't have to check every box. That's where the complexity sneaks in. That's a lot of boxes to check. How many need to be checked? Well, technically, the only boxes that have to be checked are French and anti-conventional. The rest kind of fill themselves in from there. If you're a Frenchman in the 1960s making an unconventional French film, more than likely you're going to make something that's pretty much just French New Wave. You're going to start filling in jump cuts. You're going to start filling in naturalized dialogue. So it's largely up to interpretation, but the simplest explanation is, with the trained eye, you'll kind of just know it when you see it. That's often the nature of trying to categorize an inherently abstract concept. And that's where I hit a wall. I felt like I had seen enough anime to know it when I saw it, but I didn't have the technical knowledge to define it. I sat on this script for months, unsure where to start. Then, thankfully, I got some help. What you're about to hear is a lot of research that turned this from one big long video into a series of God knows how many, and we can thank Sakuga Shoujo for that, but we will get there in just a second. As early as the 1910s, Japan's pure film movement criticized Japanese cinema for being too theatrical. Many films were essentially just filmed stage plays with static cameras and exaggerated kabuki-style acting. Much like with Western cinema, they had traditions that, while they pushed forward towards more modern filmmaking, still have a profound influence on how productions are made. And this controversy came for animation as well. The 1917 film Battle of Monkey and Crab, a famous Japanese folktale, was considered by the pure film movement as the perfect example of how to achieve their ultimate goal: sell movies overseas. You see, the exotic foreign films were seen as largely more influential than the might-as-well-be kabuki drivel coming out of Japan as far as they saw. Monkey and Crab was seen as such a success in replicating the conventions of gaijin cinema that it was just actually shown at theaters specifically renowned for showing that exotic foreign cinema. But not everyone in the movement agreed, championing more uniquely Japanese work like Hanahekonai. And that makes sense too. Instead of something that looks like everything else, why not show something that is distinctly Japanese, new, unique, different? What's interesting is how strongly against kabuki and no influences they were about live-action films, but so split about kabuki and bunraku references in animation. Would it make sense that one or both of these are considered anime? Do historians simply not refer to these as anime because the term wasn't used, or at least popular, until Astro Boy? If our only criteria is that it's only films made in Japan, then yes, these are anime. And I think here is where we can make the best case about why that argument is just too reductive. During the Sino-Japanese conflict in the 1930s and 40s, animation became a propaganda tool, reinforcing national identity and steering narratives. But post-war Western modernity and futurism deeply influenced Japanese youth culture. In the 1950s, Italian and Latino youth had unique and instantly recognizable forms of rebellion: cars and fashion. From lowriders to greaser haircuts and leather jackets, You knew a bad boy when you saw him. When this aesthetic hit Japan, it evolved into something uniquely Japanese. Bosozoku biker gangs. They looked almost identical to Western greasers, yet somehow were unmistakably Japanese. I just don't know how else to put it. As I mentioned earlier, I was about ready to give up on this script. What inspired me to pick it back up after nearly throwing in the towel was this exact clip from Sakuga Shoujo.
What I want you to notice in this clip is the focus on character to communicate emotions. You can see a stark difference in approach in clips from the first episode of Dororo, directed by Osamu Dezaki. Dezaki took influence from post-war Japanese cinema, such as the films of Akira Kurosawa.
It sparked the missing link, the things I noticed even if I didn't realize I noticed it. Jump cuts alone aren't unique to, but are emblematic of French New Wave. The noticeable limited character animation in favor of camera panning is one such idiosyncratic element that, while not unique to anime, is emblematic of it. When asking her permission to use this clip, she actually provided me with some of her perspectives and resources she was using for her videos. A big thank you to Sakuga Shoujo. You made this video happen. From the very beginning, anime had cost-saving constraints. The densely packed frames of fluid, almost non-stop animation in the United States would be expensive and time-consuming. And, as with so many creative projects before and since, overcoming limitations created a wholly new idea. Even the looping used in many Western animations was just too much. Frame rate modulation is something so distinctly anime that even those who don't know what they're looking for could spot it. The fluid, dynamic animations are kept for the more important moments, while everything else was animated on 3s, 4s, and even 6s in some cases. I mean, just look at some of these clips. You don't notice it when you're caught up in the action, but when you know to look for it, it's hard to miss.
Some so subtle you might not have even noticed, but your brain did.
And the approaches to 3D anime prove that even for people who can't put it into words, it just doesn't look right when the motion is always fluid. That's why the frame rate modulation for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse worked so well. Limiting the animation kept the visual language closer to the live-action cinema these creators loved. More than just saving costs, they created a new way to use the medium of animation to convey meaning to the audience. And these techniques have been a part of anime ever since. Other kinds of limited animation include sectioning, only one part of the body is moving, reused animations, still shots, and pull cells. Because the nuances from fluid movement are lost, animators are forced to communicate that visual information in other ways. This leads to exaggerated poses, character designs, and speedlines. Even animation workflow is different. Western studios assign specific characters to individual animators. In Japan, animators handle entire sequences, meaning they act as both directors and performers. This approach led to unique specializations among Japanese animators, such as effects or character animation, enabling them to cultivate distinct artistic voices. In early productions in studios like Mushi and Toei, animators like Yasuji Mori and Akira Daikubara were given the freedom to animate scenes based on their own styles and sensibilities. This creative autonomy has paved the way for the emergence of iconic animators like Yasuo Otsuka and Hayao Miyazaki, whose distinctive styles have left a lasting impact on the medium. Another distinctly anime feature is the seemingly seamless integration of foreign styles, concepts, stories, mythologies, settings, etc., so on and so forth. You get it. Of course, not that the Japanese are the only culture to incorporate exotic elements into their art. That's literally every culture that's even once met another. What strikes me as so unique, though, is the fluidity with which it's incorporated. The best example I can think of is Blue Exorcist. By words alone, the mythology is Catholic. The exorcists, the names of the demons, the fact that the exorcists are just straight up Catholic most of the time. But not only are there Shinto Buddhist exorcists, the way the demons are treated, portrayed, and designed are so distinctly Japanese yokai. And what's always amazed me is that it really does seem like that's just naturally how the story would work. Something about the culture, the mentality of Japanese creatives makes the combination of Western and Eastern cultures so seamless. We can't ignore the style of anime being a combination of Japanese cartooning, comic books, Disney animation, and cats, maybe? But that does change over time. There are movements within anime itself that reflect the cultural changes and technological advancements. So, as vague as it might seem, the style might simply have to be stated as contains the spirit of Japanese style. More than likely a consequence, at least in part, of sequence animation. But that does give us a hint as to the answer, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So here's the short list of anime characteristics. This is not a complete list. This is just for us to continue this conversation. We will explore this further in later episodes. So the short list is frame rate modulation / Sakuga, cinematic / background focus camera motion, juxtaposed Japanese and Western narrative aesthetic elements, sequence animation, post-animation recording / lip syncing, sectioning, and other various limited animation techniques, and lastly, exaggerated acting or design. Okay, I know you saw that title card. Before we dive in, let's define what we actually mean when we say meme. For those unfamiliar, the term meme was originally coined by Richard Dawkins in The Selfish Gene to describe a unit of cultural transmission, essentially a cultural gene. Just like biological genes replicate and mutate as they spread, memes evolve through imitation and adaptation, shaping the way societies think, behave, and express themselves. Suddenly, going viral seems pretty literal, doesn't it? And memes aren't just internet jokes. They encompass beliefs, rituals, fashion, language, and art. They're how ideas spread and take on a life of their own. So, unless we're willing to say that anime was a Japanese movement in animation that started in the 60s and lasted until, let's just say, the 80s, I think artistic movement just doesn't quite cut it. But memes don't just appear out of nowhere. We can acknowledge anime's rich history and cultural roots while still boldly proclaiming Astro Boy as the inception of the meme that we call anime. All modern anime can trace their lineage back to that singular point. From Astro Boy onward, anime has evolved, changed, it's been influenced by the novelties of each passing year, just like the meme of the rebellious greaser spread as far as the land of the samurai and questionable cetaceans. Anime is a living, evolving cultural phenomenon, just like a meme. So again, if Afro Samurai is considered anime, but Oban Star Racers isn't, why? Just literally why? In the age of communication, we're more interconnected than ever. Influences from across the world are just a tap away. Eventually, if we're not already there, productions outside Japan will become indistinguishable from Japanese animation in the future. At what point does anime stop being anime? Do we stubbornly insist that only productions we deem sufficiently Japanese qualify? Will we one day be calling something made in America anime while rejecting content from Japan because it doesn't feel right? We briefly, and I mean briefly, covered some of the ways that Western cinema had a strong impact on animation in Japan. We even hinted at how Western fashion, mannerisms, and culture influenced Japan. We talked about how Astro Boy was a hit even in America, so much so that people who had no idea what anime was remember and love Astro Boy. Asian cinema also influenced the West by means of Kurosawa films, inspiring many Westerns, which inspired more samurai films, which inspired more Westerns. The Magnificent Seven was based on Seven Samurai, as most know, and many plot elements and camera blocks in Star Wars are inspired by the Hidden Fortress. And of course, Star Wars alone has inspired the entire globe, including anime creators. And that doesn't even begin to touch how quickly the internet became the true cultural environment for anime. I wanted to include so much more about that very subject in this video, but it is already way too long, so that'll just have to take its own episode. In short, anime from its inception was a uniquely Japanese but undeniably global production. Much like a film movement, we cannot have anime without that unique mentality, the quintessential elements of what creates that mentality, that philosophy, and that unconscious mimetic vector of not skin color or genetic makeup or place of birth or place of work, it's culture. But not strictly Japanese culture either. Though even if Japan ceased to exist, it will always be inseparable from anime. When it began, despite the myriad Western influences, it was something that could only come from Japan. But Japan also embraced technology and communications quickly. Global culture was a part of anime as it grew and expanded even before the communities overseas grew anywhere close to where they are now. Anime communities embraced and grew in the internet. And so the meme, as it's evolved, is also inseparable from this new culture of online anime watchers. So yes, there are certain parameters we must consider when calling something anime. Some shows are still up for debate. I don't think this is all one big airtight argument for once and for all declaring what is and isn't anime. By its very nature, what I've done is rejecting the black and white altogether. Some things are definitely anime, some things are definitely not, but there are some in that gray area. Maybe one day I'll come back to this topic older and wiser and with more solid answers, but I think it's far more likely that the truth is simply more shades of gray. So, as specific, precise, and accurate as I can possibly be, anime is a meme.
Where are the subtitles?